The United Nations was created after World War II and the atrocities of the Holocaust to ensure world peace and to drive cooperation between all the nations on the planet. Worked out great. In 1972, the UN elected their fourth Secretary General, a man named Kurt Waldheim. Now, don't worry, this episode isn't about the UN. I've talked about them enough, but I have a point to make first. So, back to Waldheim. The UN likes to say he was controversial. Interesting word. Let's look it up, see what it means. Contentious, disputed, leads to argument. Okay, let's see what this Kurt guy did to be so controversial. Let me just look that up real quick. Okay, found it. He was an actual Nazi. No, not like we call random people we don't like Nazis. That guy didn't pass me the milk. What a Nazi. No, an honest to goodness, according to Hoyle, Nazi. Like part of the German Nazi party. Yeah, it turns out he participated in Nazi atrocities in Greece and Yugoslavia when he was an officer in the Wehrmacht, the Nazi army that worked closely with the SS and their Einsatzgruppen death squads. Special. Head of the UN. To the UN, that's worthy of dispute. It's contentious. It might spark an argument on either side, for or against, whatever. It's not just straight up, holy shit, we accidentally elected a fucking Nazi to run the UN. Bad, just, controversial. So that clarifies a fuck ton about the UN, but it's still not why I'm mentioning it. If you go on ChatGPT right now and ask it to summarize Kurt's time as head of the UN, you get a lot of great platitudes. It talks of his, and I'm quoting here, efforts in the Middle East, his focus on humanitarian efforts and regime issues, and his diplomatic efforts in South Africa, his navigation of Cold War tensions, and his historic expansion of UN membership. Sounds like a dream come true. The last paragraph says he had, I'm again quoting, controversies post-UN related to his potentially being involved in war crimes and how that overshadowed much of his work at the UN. Oh, so much quoting, my hands are tired. Of course, you know how ChatGPT works. You know it scrapes the internet, and one of its main sources is Hamas storefront, Wikipedia. If you don't know what happened to Wikipedia since it became the new Der Stürmer, please go look it up. The Jerusalem Post, Tablet Magazine, the Times of Israel, The Forward, and even CNN have run great pieces about this. It's quite a major problem. Anyway, it's that type of fuckery that got ChatGPT to slow roll criticism of the Nazi head of the UN. Meanwhile, in real life, he oversaw Resolution 3379, which labeled Zionism, the movement, to remind you, to reestablish the Jewish state that had once stood in our homeland once again, to call that a form of racism. Yeah, you heard that right. It was one of the first instances of Israel being slapped with the bullshit label of apartheid. It was passed through Nazi officer Waldheim by 75 countries, all of which, interestingly enough, were either Arab, Muslim, African, Soviet bloc, or communist. And the 6 straggler countries that don't fit into any of those designations were Bhutan, Cyprus, Malta, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and India, who all have one thing in common. None of them have ever, not once, not a single time ever, voted for Israel since any of them joined the UN. 0% collectively. It's actually impressive. So it's safe to say they're an easy vote against Israel. Are you starting to see how the UN functions? You gather the Islamists, the communists, and the anti-Jew bigots, and you basically can pass any resolution you want, which is why Israel gets sanctioned about a zillion times more than any other country, or all countries combined, actually. Now, this still isn't what I want to talk about today. Why do I mention all of this? Because what isn't said is what Herr Waldheim suddenly did quietly in the shadows that no one might have noticed, that had long-term effects. Let's forget that he called a Jewish hostage rescue operation from Uganda a, quote, serious violation of the national sovereignty of a United Nations member state. Forget that. Forget that he got love letters from dictators and murderers, including one applauding the massacre of the Israeli Olympic athletes in Munich. Forget all that. What bothers me is this. While this literal Nazi oversaw the UN, he brought a lot of new countries into the fold. 21 countries, to be exact. And of those 21, only Germany stands as the one new country during his term that does not regularly vote against the Jews. Fully, all the other 20 have voted against Israel. You see, they let the fox into the henhouse. No, that's not right. They let the fox run the henhouse, and he fundamentally changed it forever, adding Jew haters to the voting rolls, changing the definition of Zionism, normalizing defending the worst terrorist assholes in the world. Yes, they repealed the Zionist as racism and apartheid thing in 1991, but as you can tell by the way these words are being bandied around today, the damage had already been done. These things last forever, long after fuckface Waldheim finally had a heart attack and died the death he so richly deserved. So what's my point? That we in the United States have an election coming up. And make no mistake, Israel is on the ballot. And just like when the UN didn't realize they had a Nazi in their midst and elevated him to a leadership position in a body meant to keep the peace, we, once again, have foxes in our henhouse. And most of us don't know it. Now, this is not an inherently political podcast. It's political in so much that I talk about Judaism and Israel and things like that, but it's not political in terms of American politics. I occasionally mention something a politician is doing in relation to those things, but my goal here is not to tell anybody how to vote. But because Israel is on the ballot, I am going to take a magnifying lens to American politics during this podcast. Today, I'm going to be talking about who Kamala Harris has been surrounding herself with and why, to the Jews, the people in Kamala's entourage should be as scary as Dante's seventh circle of hell. That's the violence one, by the way, with the river of boiling blood and fire. Understand, again, that I try to stay away from partisan politics here, so I'm really just analyzing the facts, which I try to present as simply as possible. I don't care that Kamala used to be the most liberal person in the entire Senate, even to the left of socialist, communist, fucking nutjob, self-hating gino Bernie Sanders, and I don't care that she has transformed today into a gun-toting, fracking-loving, border wall-building, tough-on-crime, no-tip taxing, middle-class former McDonald's employee, aka a Republican, I guess. What I do care about are the people around her who hate the Jews, and who hate Israel, and who, once they get into the henhouse, are desperate to try to destroy the country once and for all. That's what scares me, and frankly, what should scare all of us. Today, we're going over what I call the Democrats' Jewish problem. I'm Golan, and welcome to Jew Can't Handle the Truth. I know that I normally speak on behalf of Jews or Israelis or try to educate others about either of those groups, but today I'm speaking to every American who values the partnership that we have with our democratic ally, Israel. The only democratic ally, I might add, that we have in the Middle East. To all of you who have not been getting your news from Chinese government mouthpiece TikTok or Qatari-funded state media like Al Jazeera, or from any number of corrupt NGOs you've already heard me rail about, this issue should be as alarming as hell for you. There's a very good chance Kamala is going to be our next president, and the people we vote in now will be shaping and establishing policies that are going to be set in stone for the long haul. And what happens if those people are anti-Israel, anti-Jewish, anti-the West, anti-civilized values? We need to know now so my UN example does not come to pass for the US. Or, to put it more succinctly, I'll use an old Washington quip. Personnel is policy. As the campaigns have dragged on seemingly forever, Kamala has been bringing certain people into her potential administration. I want to do some breaking down about who they are, about why so many of them have troubling connections to anti-Israel and anti-Jewish movements, about why they share anti-Jewish and anti-Israeli comments online, about how they've been trying to influence the Biden-Harris administration and now the Harris-Walz administration, and how dangerous that is for Israel, to be sure, but also for America. We're running out of time to have this conversation, which is why I wanted to do it now, and we better move fast. Settle in. The saddest part of Kamala surrounding herself with bigots, racists, and terror supporters is the sheer number of names I'm about to throw at you. Let's start this journey by talking about probably the single most troubling figure in Harris's orbit, Maher Bitar, I'll focus most of my time on him just because he's the most dangerous man in Washington right now in terms of his position and his access. Bitar's journey started at Georgetown University. Georgetown. For context, this is a campus roiled with Jew hatred. Swastika graffiti has been reported for years, and this was prior to October 7th when anti-Semitism was asshole chic. Their racism and bigotry was way ahead of the curve. So much so that their faculty released an official statement saying that Jews have no connection to Judea. Weird take, like saying bananas have no connection to banana bread. Plus trafficking and all the worst shit being said about the Jews, including calling us bitches. You know, because we're dogs. This is the same school that, coming up soon, has a satellite campus hosting, and no, this is not hyperbole, an actual Hamas terrorist to speak at an event called Reimagining Palestine. I can only assume his version of Reimagining Palestine will be about the virtues of murdering your own children and putting terror tunnels under kindergartens. Can't wait to hear. Georgetown also has a JVP chapter, which is like saying they have an Iranian consulate on campus. See my previous episode to be informed about what a non-Jewish trashfire 0% humanity organization JVP is. That bag of asshats celebrated on October 7th, literally releasing their own statement condoning the violence, the torture, the infanticide, the kidnapping, and the rape. And no, sadly, I'm not fucking kidding. Which brings us to the other major terrorist organization on Georgetown's campus, SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine. You've heard me mention it before. This is an organization literally funded by terrorist dollars with direct connections to Hamas and Iran. They were really the tip of the spear when it came to the anti-Jewish marches on campus, the roach motels known as encampments, and significantly, the BDS movement. That's boycott, divestment, and sanction, which uses a subtle strategy known as, and let me make sure I'm pronouncing this correctly, lying. No, lying. Yeah, that's it. So they were lying to pretend Israel is violating human rights and falsely accusing it of, quote, apartheid and whatever else they make up to try to vilify the Jews. Back in 2001, there was a conference in Iran titled something like A Plan of Action Against Racism, and another one in South Africa titled something like Racial Discrimination, Xenophobia, and Related Intolerances. Okay, guys, look, for future reference, holding meetings about racism in Iran and South Africa is just, it's like too on the nose. It's like watching Night of the Living Dead in a cemetery. It's putting a hat on a hat. It's too much. Anyway, I digress. My point is that BDS sucks, that Georgetown is a cesspool you should never send your children to, that SJP is a Nazi-like organization, and that the guy we're talking about, Maher Bitar, who Kamala Harris currently works alongside and, rumor has it, is considering as her Director of National Intelligence, holy shit, is a massive anti-Semite and has been for many years. I mentioned he went to Georgetown. There's more to it than that. He was one of the leaders of the aforementioned Students for Justice in Palestine chapter on campus. Yes, the organization that knew about October 7th massacres and had anti-Jewish signs already pre-printed on October 8th, while terrorists were still inside Israel raping little girls. Wonder how they got that info. Weird. Anyway, he ran that little fascist book club, then went to intern at UNRWA. Oh, wow. Okay, UNRWA, as you're aware, is a terrorist organization that literally teaches Palestinians to kill Jews. And I mean literally. People use that word out of context and don't really know what it means. I mean literally. See, one chapter of a Gaza textbook entitled, quote, Islamic Education encourages Palestinian girls either to die, to murder, or to celebrate their own kids' death in a discussion on the role of women in combat. UNRWA also makes it impossible for Palestinians to lose their refugee status, aka their victim cards, and actively participated in October 7th, including raping, kidnapping, slaughtering, and holding hostages in their homes. So that's the second red flag on Maher. Shall we go for 3? His master thesis, entitled Unprotected Amongst Brothers, Palestinians in the Arab World, focuses on the Nakba, comparing it to the Holocaust. Well, feel free to watch my episode entitled The Myth of the Nakba, the title should give you a hint, for more info on why his entire thesis is built on horseshit. But more than that, he uses this fictional catastrophe as a weapon to bludgeon home his point that the only solution that he finds acceptable to the Arab-Israeli conflict is to grant the original Palestinian refugees the right of return. Oh, and also to grant the right of return to their children and their grandchildren and their great grandchildren and their great 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 grandchildren and on and on and on until the country of Israel is destroyed. It's not quite as stupid a plan as when Lex Luthor bought up large swaths of the desert and then tried to blow up California so he could own all the new waterfront property, but it's pretty close. And also, like Lex's plan, right of return will never happen, as it's just code for destroying Israel, and everybody fucking knows it. And Maher's entire thesis is that, not really hiding the ball. Just to roll through a few of his other foibles, since we have a lot to get to, he also worked for the rabidly anti-Israel Foundation for Middle East Peace, sounds good, right? Marched around wearing a keffiyeh, or as I like to call them, hipster swastikas, led anti-Jewish marches and campaigns, and as part of his official position, this is now in the White House, pushes to isolate Israel diplomatically, economically, and culturally, as well as to pressure Israel into concessions that many believe would jeopardize its security, with little to no assurance that it would lead to peace. Maher is currently Biden's senior director for intelligence on the National Security Council. That puts him in charge of national security intelligence. That means he's the one who creates the daily briefs that inform Biden as to what's going on when it comes to that region. Anything he says becomes gospel to Biden, even if it's not true. Knowing that, some of the crazy flip-flops and wilder statements Biden has made about Israel and Gaza, including repeating fake terrorist numbers and making easily disproven false accusations against the most moral army in the world, suddenly doesn't feel so weird anymore. This guy has the president's ear when it comes to this matter, and if all of Biden's information comes through the filter of an SJP, UNRWA, Hamas, Iran mouthpiece like Maher, it's going to be heavily skewed in one direction, and it won't be the one that fights for good. But he's just the first of the villains in this story. The next one might surprise you, as unfortunately for the tribe, he's Jewish. Ay, 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 here we go. Seems counterintuitive to lump him in with Maher, but sadly, some Jews don't know their history, don't love their people, or are brainwashed to fight against their own self-interest. Sometimes all three. So, with that in mind, let's talk about Ilan Goldenberg, Kamala Harris's pick for her future Jewish outreach director, if she's allowed to take office. You know what, hang on. Before we get to Ilan's background, I need to get my own bias out of the way here. My name is Golan. I'm named after the Golan Heights. That's a mountain in Israel. Yes, I said Israel. If you look at Wikipedia, it lets you know that the mountain is in Syria. So that's awesome and weird. And since ChatGPT scrapes Wikipedia, a site completely corrupted by anti-Semitic assholes, for its information, it also lets me know that Israel is occupying Syrian land. It's good stuff. My bias about this particular topic is not only that I want Israel to retain the Golan, but also that I would rather not have the conversation where people ask my name and then assume I'm Syrian when I give it. So that brings us back around to little Ilan, who opposes the idea of recognizing the Golan as sovereign Israeli territory, which was done by the Trump administration back in 2019. Okay, truth be told, that's my own personal shit. That alone might piss me off personally, but it's not enough for me to label him as real trouble. Until you find out what else he believes. The list is, well, it's long. You know what? I'm just going to do highlights. I'll run through them quick. I won't even mention that he worked for the virulently anti-Israel and seemingly eager to give Iran a back rub Brookings Institute, or the equally anti-Israel and pro-Iran appeasement Center for a New American Security. So fancy. Such an asshole. Okay, since I'm not mentioning any of that, let's get to the list. Here goes. 1, he renounced his Israeli citizenship. 2, he imposed sanctions on Israelis under the Biden administration. 3, he pushed to reopen the PLO offices in Washington, D.C. that Trump had shut down. You heard that one right. He wanted the terrorist organization known as the Palestinian Liberation Organization, you know, the guys who hijacked the planes and led the genocidal intifadas, to have a little office near the president, our president of the United States. Anyway, number 4, he attempted to get the U.S. to restore funding to UNRWA after they were involved in the atrocities of October 7th. Cool guy. 5, he aggressively pressured Israel to go back to pre-1967 borders without offering up any new security protocols in place, which is batshit insane to think that they would agree to such a thing. Number 6, he loved and supported the disastrous Iran nuclear deal, which I'd argue led directly to October 7th, but Let's keep going. Number 7, he opposed moving the capital of Israel to Jerusalem, where it's always been, regardless of some fucking American office building. Thanks very much. Number 8, he opposed the Taylor Force Act. Listen to this one, because all the other ones you might have ideological differences with. Here's one I don't think you can deny. The Taylor Force Act is the act which basically says that we, the US, stop handing over buckets of cash to the Palestinian Authority as long as they continue to pay terrorists as part of their pay-for-slay policy. He opposed that. Honestly, I mean, stuff like this, it makes him sound like a cartoon villain. But wait, there's more. Number 9, he was reportedly one of the architects and main cheerleaders of Obama's decision to abstain on a UN resolution condemning Israel, one of the most egregious examples of ally betrayal in modern history. And something that Biden did later as well, also with Goldenberg's prompting. All right, that's enough. There's a lot I didn't get to, but we have a limited time together. Okay, I'm gonna do one more since I'm OCD and I want it to be a nice round number. Number 10. Elon not only supports a two-state solution, which puts him in line with other delusional anti-historical people, but he advocates for that new Pali state to include, and I quote, this is gorgeous, a group of Palestinian factions that includes Hamas and Fatah and that has the blessing of the PLO. I mean, holy fuck. You can't make this shit up. But let's be real. This isn't just about policy papers and diplomatic stances. It isn't even just about being anti-Israel or anti-Jewish. These people, the ones in Harris's new little circle, could be shaping, and frankly, many are shaping now under the Biden-Harris administration, how the US interacts with the whole world. And that's fucking scary. Even if it was just Maher and Elon. But it's not. It's not just them. There are so many others, like Nasrina Barktzi, another Kamala ally. Cloaked in the veil of civil rights, as so many of these pieces of shit are, Barktzi's legal career has been marked with her partnering with BDS and anti-Jewish organizations that have specifically called out Israel's right to defend itself or even to exist. As far back as 2015, Barktzi was saying the quiet part out loud, describing Jewish students' complaints about anti-Semitism as, quote, organized legal bullying, which, well, just imagine if calling out racism against Black people was smeared as organized legal bullying, and see if you think anyone in politics would still be standing after saying so. She's also helped out with the wildly Jew-hating trash fires on US campuses, including helping out violent, thuggy, rape-denying, terror-supporting, Hamas-linked Students for Justice in Palestine, a recurring theme whenever possible. Or let's take Trita Parsi as another example. Parsi, a close buddy of Kamala's, who often offers up his sage advice on matters foreign and domestic. We'll just move past him working at the UN, since at this point that makes it too easy to show that someone is corrupt. But he did. He also loves him some Islamic Republic of Iran, and in fact, founded the National Iranian American Council, aka NIAC. NIAC. It's a great acronym for an evil organization that has been accused of lobbying for the wicked Iranian regime. Hydra. NIAC. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Anyway, he says things like, let's bolster the moderates in Iran, and then does everything in his power to undermine Israel and often the US, which only strengthens the Islamists over there and fucks over the moderates he pretends to care about. Wait, but that's the opposite of what he said he wanted. Whoopsie, I guess. He tries to frame any counterattack on Iran as only a function of political boogeyman Netanyahu's desire for war, as if Iran hadn't been a problem at any other time in history. He is absolutely someone shaping Kamala's foreign policy today. And I'm not even going to get into the obviously Nazi-level rhetoric of the Ilhan Omars and Rashida Tlaibs of the world, or the very dangerous idiocy of the AOCs or Jamal Bowmans that are currently littering the Democrats. Their bullshit is right there on the surface. If you don't see it, there's nothing I'm going to say here that matters, and I don't like to waste my time. Except to say that they're not just the fringe of the party. They're moving into the mainstream, and merely based on what Kamala says publicly, she seems comfortable with that. This episode has gone on long enough, so I'm not even going to get into people like Lily Sarafan, another pro-Iran, anti-Israel, anti-Jewish, pro-BDS gem of an almost human being, or Houman Fakimi, another BDS-loving prize looking to undermine American security and Israel's very existence, or Touraj Daryai, a toxic professor poisoning young minds with lies about Iran and Israel's shared history, or Brenda Abdalal, a CARE mouthpiece, and Ilan and Rashida ally, of course, who regularly calls for the destruction of the only Jewish state, or Farrakhan acolyte and Attorney General of Minnesota, Keith Ellison, who opposes aid to Israel and adores accusing Jewish cabals of secretly controlling the government, which, ooh, that sounds familiar. I also won't mention Wael Al-Zayat or Iman Awad or Salima Suswell or Kurum Wahid or Iltifat Hamzavi or Farouk Shamsi or Jen Butler or Imam Assad Zaman or Linda Thomas Greenfield or Tyler Cherry or Dan Shapiro or Jack Lew or Ramzi Kassem or Kimberly Matau Emerson or Alan D. Salamont or Rabbi Sharon Kleinbaum or Deborah Lipstadt or Tamara Kaufman-Witz or Dilawar Sayed, or Sarah Margon, or Uzra Zaya, or Samantha Power, or Colin Kahl, or Wenda Sherman, or Kristen Clark, or Deb Haaland, or Avril Haines, or Hadi Amar, or Rima Dodin, or Neuja Ali, or Ariane Tabatabai, or Mohammed El Sanor, or you get the fucking point. This isn't even the whole list. I hate to tell you how many people I've left off. This is a fraction. Even one of these people hanging out with Kamala would be enough to make me nervous. Like when I see a Tucker Carlson or an Amik Malik hanging out with Donald Trump. This isn't a one-sided issue. It just happens to be something that is far worse today on the left. And who knows what it'll be tomorrow. But let's all think about the message this sends. To Jews in America, to Israel, to our allies around the world, and to our enemies as well. Almost more importantly, to our enemies. It signals that these anti-Israel and anti-Jewish views are becoming acceptable in American leadership, and that those in charge are willing to overlook radical views if it is politically expedient. Or worse yet, and I hope I'm wrong about this, if it secretly fits into their broader foreign policy goals and they're simply lying to us about what they really believe, or who they're really eager to protect or destroy. So what happens from here? What does it mean for our relationship with Israel in the coming years? If you're an Israeli official watching all this unfold, do you trust Americans with your diplomatic matters, like the awful job the Biden-Harris administration has done with the hostage negotiations? Do you trust them with intelligence, like when Trump shared Israeli top secret info with Putin? Should domestic Jews feel safe, knowing that the US government is packed with people that hate them? Does it remind us of what was going on back in the 30s in Germany? Does it at least rhyme? We have to ask ourselves, why is Harris, or Trump for that matter, surrounding herself with these people? Why are these views becoming more and more acceptable in mainstream politics? And what happens if this continues unchecked? In the end, this is about more than just a few individuals. It's about the direction of American foreign policy. It's about our values, and for me, it's primarily about the future of the US-Israel relationship and the future of Jews in America. Maybe that's because it affects me, but that's what I keep thinking about. These appointments and these alliances matter. They matter not only for the US relationship with Israel and not only for Israel's security, but for the security of America. I'd argue that it matters for the security of the entire Western world. Because when we weaken our support for the Jews, this is history will show you, it's always only the first domino to fall. And it could very well end with a weakening of our stance against the forces of extremism and terror that threaten all of us. So as we approach the 2024 election, think about this. Do we want leaders who surround themselves with individuals who hold such troubling views, or do we want leaders who stand firm with our allies and against evil? The choice is ours and ours alone. We get to vote this next person into office, and unfortunately, it may not be as easy as voting one way or another, as this sewage is seeping into both parties, but not equally. And today, at least for me, for this election, the choice is clear. Again, I'm not telling you how to vote. I'm just telling you what I'm seeing, and what I'm seeing is troubling. I don't have a happy ending to this episode. I don't have something that I can say to you that's going to make you feel better, except to say that the power is in your hands. Your vote matters, and getting out there is already half the battle. Don't allow yourself to be on the sidelines, and don't allow yourself to vote ideologically if you don't believe that it is the right thing to do for this country or for Israel or for your people if you're Jewish. And if you're watching this and you're not Jewish, same thing applies to you except for the people thing. As always, I appreciate you allowing me to be a resource. I hope this was enlightening. I hope it was informative. I hope it was helpful. I'm Golan, and thank you for being here with me on another episode of Jew Can't Handle the Truth.